Monian downs talamu, stalum hina gruagach
Hi, this is Courtney Williams with Outlander Behind the Scenes, bringing you the next segment of my interview with Àdhamh Ó Broin. Àdhamh is the Gaelic consultant for Outlander, which means he translates the scripts into Gaelic where appropriate and then teaches the language to the actors. In this segment of our interview, we talk about the learning curve that was involved in that job between season 1 and season 2. And also, we talk about Àdhamh's journey with the Gaelic language, where his passion comes from, and how that developed. Please enjoy this segment of my interview with Àdhamh Ó Broin. Thank you. All right, we're live.
It's alive.
We're live. Has there been a learning curve? So, like, I assume you get these scripts in English and then you translate them to Gaelic. You're saying, then you teach them to the actors. So, have you, when you first did it, did you realize the thing about, not feeling like they had cotton in their mouth or whatever, or did you have to learn that on the job?
No, I definitely learned that on the job, and when I say that, I don't mean learned it from scratch on the job. I already knew that was going to be the challenge, but I didn't realize that there were actually some shortcuts you can make with some of the sounds. And it was because I had never taught actors and never taught for a project of that kind of gravity. So at the start, I just wanted everything to be perfect because this was the language's big shot. And I was like, that everything must be perfect. And I'd be saying to the guys, no, you've got to make this sound. You have to do it. You can't speak Gaelic without it. And I now realise that there are actually sneaky little ways of getting around these sounds, which neither myself nor anybody I've ever met has, I've never heard anybody talk to me about these tricks and sneaks. These are ones that I've made up while I'm on the job, realizing where the key challenges actually are in learning the language in a way I never had before, because I never had these kind of stakes. Do you know what I mean? The stakes are so high. You're not just teaching wee Mrs. McDonald's niece who's come along to work out what her auntie is talking about at the weekend. That's not what we're doing. The language is getting the sort of the highest and most exciting platform it's had since it was in its own heyday, had its own importance, didn't need anybody to tell it was important or great. But since the rather unfortunate history of the language, very much disappearing off the face of the earth, then this was really our biggest shot to get it right back into prominence, and therefore shine the light back on Scotland and get us thinking about where it belongs and what the significance of it is. So at the start, it was like everything's got to be perfect, And I suppose, I probably did put a bit of pressure on the guys, like, realise how culturally significant this is.
It went fantastically well with Sam. The man just has a very live brain. He's an extremely capable guy. He's also extraordinarily professional and dedicated to getting it right.
Ashivandul and Chikala Hur era halak, Anara o Kurora. Anara Huro.
And they loved it. They loved that sense of purpose. They thought that was great, even if they'd never had any connection to Scotland or Gaelic or anything before that. They loved being part of a movement that way. But at the same time, I do look back now and I think, that there were ways to actually cheat that a little bit and give those guys an easier time, and we definitely work more that way now. And it's funny, having not been involved quite as much in season 2, because obviously it was a change attack. It was very much all about the glitz and the glam and the French, feel and the costumes and the whole look of the thing. And it was a different tack. And the language, of course, not being anywhere close to as prominent because we weren't in Scotland. What that did was allowed me a chance to kind of relax back, take a step back and say, well, how could I approach this? So when I did come to work with the guys again, we definitely cut some corners. We definitely cheated some things. And frankly, it came out just as good as it did in season 1. In retrospect, it's like, wow, hindsight, as anyone does in a job, as they evolve, as they gain experience, then you kind of look back and you go, I wish I'd known that, just before I started. But you know, it's a journey, not a destination, is it not?
When did your journey with the Gaelic language start, and how did it start?
I mean, it started growing up in a house in Argyll in Tunnabruich called OutlanderBTS, which is the Black Well. So I grew up in a house with a Gaelic name, which had been owned by an Isla family called the McKechnies, who were a really, really well-known scholarly family in the Gaelic world. We had Derek Thompson, who was one of the greatest Gaelic scholars of all time. His son had the flat downstairs from us, and I used to go and sit in his flat and chat with him when I was like 5 or 6, and always thought it was funny that he spelled his name Domhnall. You know, of course, it wasn't Domhnall at all. It was Donald, which is Gaelic for Donald, but I didn't know that at the time. And, you know, he would sing in Gaelic and what have you. And then there was a fella called Callum Ferguson, who's a very eminent kind of author and speaker from Lewis, and he was a family friend. So myself and my mum would go and see him and his kids, and you know. So, and I remember him giving me my very first Gaelic lesson at the age of 7 on how to pronounce the place name that I came from. So it was all around all the time. And then just as I get into sort of my early teens, you know, my gran had started to, you know, she had started to become more Scottish in her old age, because I was brought up more or less nominally British. I mean, my parents parted company when I was 6, but they were both no interest in Scotland, no interest in music, no interest in culture, no interest in anything like that. You know, so I was sort of basically a walking blank slate. I suppose got the initial interest in actually learning the language directly from my grandmother, who then came out with this sort of revelation of all our people on the Caithness side, which is the very northeast of Scotland, all had the Gaelic. Oh, right, okay. And she only had 3 phrases that her father had passed on to her, and he was really irritated that his father never taught him. And all she could say was Matin va, good morning, Eicheva, good night, and Slancheva, you know, good health. So that was all she had. So I learned these 3 phrases from her, and she sort of said to me during, you know, the very last kind of couple of years of her life, she was sitting in a hospital bed, and she sort of, you know, said to me, you know, have you learned the Gaelic yet? You know, and I'm saying, no, I've not got into it yet. And she's like, well, what are you waiting about for? I'm too old, you know. And she's like 96 or something, you know. She's like, I can't do it. Get on it. And she shook her fist at me and went, bring it back. But I started pottering away with a couple of books, but didn't really do much in the first year, and then started going to classes. So from there, it just grew. It was like literally like I got, you know, bitten by the Gaelic vampire, and then became one myself, you know. Just like, but I mean, you know, at first I just kind of like floated about from class to class, but eventually I had to feed, you know. So I obviously went after more Gaelic meat, you know. And you know, I suppose it just the more you eat, the more you crave. And it was, you know, like I quite often say to people, you know, yeah, I just started. I started smoking the Gaelic at weekends with friends, and before long, I was injecting it straight into the vein.
Your grandmother started you off in your living situation, and your family was part of that. But the passion, the way it was ignited in you, has something to do with you, though, right?
Well, I think it must do, but you know, being a sort of walking blank slate, I think I was probably always searching for where the heck I came from, and all the way through my life, I'd always felt this sort of connection to my surroundings, and I'd been fascinated with place names, and I would listen to Gaelic music as a matter of choice. That's all I listened to, Runrig and Capercaillie, and especially Capercaillie, and other acts that I can't really remember now. You know, Clanads, you know, stuff that isn't exactly, you know, really necessarily fantastic, but it's all you can get a hold of at that age without a guide. You know, just stuff that's come popping into the charts now and again, but it's Gaelic. I was just like, that's for me. So while all my mates are all giving it and raving it up, you know, there's me sitting at home with the high diddle-dee-dee, you know. You know, there was always this connection between myself and my culture and my country, and I've always been a red hot patriot. I've always been, you know, for an independent Scotland, and neither of my parents believed in it at all. And I know some other people like that who've got no reason to be, you know, patriotic, and yet they are. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's about reconnecting with a vein that carries Scotland's soul along in it. And if you want to, you can bite right into it. I mean, you know, it's like tap into it. Just tap into it. And once you touch it, you actually touch that living vein, which essentially is Gaelic language and culture. It's a super highway back into the past, and you're just zipped right back into the past, and you necessarily reconnect, and you begin to feel very, very powerful, to be perfectly honest, but in a really good way. It is frankly pretty much pseudo-religious, you know. Gaelic language and culture has an energy that even in areas where the language has ceased to be spoken, if you sit quietly in that area composing bardach, which is poetry, or composing áireann, which are songs, or just singing or playing the pipes, or you just get completely connected right back into the energy that's there. And I believe the Gaelic energy that exists in Scotland, which surrounds us in the Highlands and in the Northern Lowlands, anywhere that Gaelic was spoken, still has that energy, and you can reconnect with that, and it will more or less show you how to live your life. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm living proof of it. It works for me, you know. It makes me feel totally and utterly at home, relaxed and fearless, you know. And I suppose that's what allowed me to take on the work with Outlander, which I know a lot of people said to me, I don't know how you cope with that pressure. That is insane. You know, having to take the language single-handedly, because it was just me, how to single-handedly take the language to Hollywood, you know, and sort of come out relatively unscathed. They're like, I don't know how you did it. I'll tell you how I did it, because the entire time that I was doing it, the Gaelic spirit of Scotland was pulsing through my every vein, you know. And if there was a big shoot and there was something really important that we were about to do, like maybe Graham had a big speech or Sam had a big section, I would be listening to pipe music on the way in the car to set in the morning, and literally, you know, concentrating on the road. But other than that, that was my only distraction from absolutely channeling the spirit of this nation into myself every time I had a big job to do. And that's how I get through it, you know. And yeah, so it maybe sounds a bit religious, but I'm cool with that.
It's wonderful to see you and talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie.
Was it go hen a bochen go, get bog a hook me loigut, money and downs talamu, stalum hin a gruagach stu halin down as boche, them veoch at all me fuagut, money and downs talamu.